I was about 15, which means I was fully aware that Santa isn't real. However, I had a little sister, Sacha. She was just 5 at the time, and my mom was away in Africa working for an NGO through the winter. So when Christmas came around, I had to take care of Sacha on my own, as we didn't have a dad. I wanted to give her a really good Christmas, as it was the first one we would celebrate on our own, and I also wanted to take this opportunity to have a quiet week after a stressful school term. Unfortunately, I made some really bad decisions that ended up traumatizing both me and Sacha. This is the first time I'm opening up about this story, and I hope it'll serve as a cautionary tale to anyone who has to take care of their little siblings during Christmas time. A few days before Christmas, I took Sacha to a shopping mall to look for some Christmas decorations, sweets, and gifts. I was wondering how I'd be able to grab presents for Sacha without her seeing them before the actual Christmas day, but I couldn't leave her home alone either. So I decided I was going to take my chances and maybe distract her when it actually came to picking a gift for her. You can imagine my relief when we got to the shopping mall and found a Santa Claus in the main hall, singing joyfully and giving out presents to kids. He looked younger than the usual Santa, but I couldn't see that well under the hat and fake beard. Anyway, I wasn't surprised about his age, as many students work as Santas for a little extra cash every winter. It wasn't until we got closer to him that I noticed something was off about this character. He was squinting weirdly at the kids on his lap, and he had these creepy twitches with his arms and neck. I was getting ready to leave when Sacha asked me excitedly if we could go meet Santa and get a present. I thought again about how this might be the only opportunity for my little sister to get a surprise present. Then I tried to dismiss Santa's weird behavior in my mind, thinking maybe he'd just have too much coffee. So I grabbed Sacha's hand and we went to meet Santa. We waited a few minutes in line, then we got to the front and Santa's eyes interlocked with mine. "Well, you're a bit old for Santa's lap now, aren't you?" He smirked at me, and I felt a knot in my stomach. He sounded more lecherous than funny. I didn't like that remark at all, but I looked at my sister, making it clear that it was her that wanted a Christmas present from him. He exclaimed, "Ah!" and invited Sacha to his lap. I whispered to her to be quick, as I wanted to avoid any more horrible comments from him. Sacha skipped towards Santa, and he grabbed her and put her on his lap, while twitching and making me anxious in the process. "Now that's a sweet little girl," he said to Sacha, with that same horrible smile. Then he asked her what she would like for Christmas. Sacha was very candid and said she would like a nice Christmas with her sister. Santa looked at me, then back at Sacha, and said, "Your sister sure is a fine young lady." By now I was flustered and certain that I wanted to leave. "Just give her a gift already," I shouted at Santa, and a few heads turned at me. Santa scoffed, muttered something, and gave Sacha a big box wrapped in starry paper. I grabbed Sacha and carried on with my Christmas shopping. When we got back home, I was still thinking about the creepy, twitching Santa. I was trying to get him out of my head, but I hated the way he talked about me, especially in front of my little sister. I wanted to tell my mom about it, but I didn't want to stress her out. She was far away from us, and there was nothing she could do about it, really. So I decided I was going to put a movie on and relax while Sacha opened her present excitedly. There was a train kit inside Sacha's box, and she proceeded to lay it out on the floor and try to put it together. I was trying to watch an animal documentary, but Sacha kept asking me to help her with the train kit. I paused the documentary and got down on the floor with Sacha when I heard a strange noise coming from outside. I was pretty sure it was steps, so I went to the window and moved the curtains to have a look. I froze. Creepy Santa was staring into the living room. We looked at each other from a very short distance, only separated by a glass. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any weapons close by, and he could easily break the front door. I told Sacha to run upstairs and lock herself in her bedroom. I called 911 as fast as I could, but I could see Santa staring at me all the while, and I could barely concentrate on telling the police what they needed to know. What followed were the longest 10 minutes of my life. I waited in the living room for the police, trembling, and listening to Santa say things like, "Why were you mean to me today?" And, "Don't you know, I'm a fine young man too." I was extremely scared, convinced that Santa could break in at any time and attack me and my sister. Finally, the police arrived, and Santa tried to scutter away, but he wasn't quick enough. 2 policemen pinned him to the ground and arrested him. He still managed to make a disgusting comment while they took him away, but I didn't care anymore. I knew Sacha and I were safe. I went upstairs and told her it was safe to come down. She was shaken too. She was just a 5-year-old, and seeing Santa in such a disturbing state surely ruined her Christmas. When I was a senior in high school, I got a job as Santa's elf in the local shopping mall to make some extra cash for the winter holidays. It wasn't much, but my family was struggling financially at the time as my mom had left us, and Dad was working 2 jobs to support me and my 2 brothers. I was old enough to work now, so I didn't want to miss an easy opportunity to make some money. Anyways, the elf job was pretty straightforward. It mostly meant putting up the Christmas decorations in the big hall and helping Santa pass the presents to the kids. If anything, it sounded like it was going to be pretty boring, but boring was better than stressful, I thought back then. What I didn't know was that it was going to become as stressful as it could get. On my first day at the mall, the manager introduced me to the guy who was going to be that year's Santa. If love at first sight exists, well, this was the opposite. I couldn't stand the guy. I don't know why, but something was wrong with him, and I knew it in my bones. He wasn't dressed in the Santa costume yet, so I could take a good look at his face. He had sunken eyes and stubble that looked more like he forgot to shave than a fashion choice. He looked back at me as the manager introduced us to each other, and I was sure he could tell I didn't like him. He squinted at me and put his arm out to shake hands, but his hand was weirdly limp. He said his name was Simon, then immediately turned back and got busy with setting up the decorations. The manager kind of shrugged and left us to do our job. Even though I wasn't feeling friendly towards Simon, I didn't want to appear outright hostile, so I asked him if he needed a hand with the equipment. He threw some fairy lights at me and muttered, "Do what you want," with a voice so hoarse it gave me a shiver down my spine. I didn't understand why he was so mean. I get it. I wasn't all smiles either, but I hadn't done anything to deserve this. Eventually, it was time to receive kids into the mall and offer them presents. Simon and I did our job quietly, and I was very off-put by his lack of joy when interacting with the kids. They were kids, for crying out loud. They wanted to see a happy Santa and spread their enthusiasm for Christmas. Instead, they got a guy named Simon in a patchy red costume saying "ho, ho, ho" in the most monotonous way I've ever heard. A few days passed and I was getting close to the end of my week-long job. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day were going to be work-free as the mall closed all shops for everyone to be with their families. To be honest, by now I was just looking forward to finishing my job so that I could stop seeing Simon. The atmosphere was very tense whenever I was around him. He would either mutter some nasty comment about me or the kids, or give me the silent treatment, which is just as abusive as being verbally mean. After all the kids left, and there was only one cleaning personnel left in the mall, I grabbed my bag and went to the bathroom before I left the place. When I exited the toilet and went to the sinks, I found Simon there, waiting for me. My heart stopped. I realized I couldn't run as he was just near the exit and he could easily grab me. I tried to act cool and went to wash my hands, ignoring him, but this only triggered him further. "I don't understand why girls like you ignore me," he said coldly, and made my heart pound faster. "Girls like me?" I asked, hoping for a more normal conversation. "Yeah, like you, young and pretty and whatever. You disgust me," I could see his bloodshot eyes giving away his facial expression, otherwise covered by the Santa hat and beard. "Simon," I started, thinking that addressing him by his name would establish some sort of connection. "I don't know what experiences you've had in your past, but I didn't do anything to you. If anything, I felt you were hostile to me from the start, and I don't know why." I could barely finish my sentence, and Simon shouted at me, "No, you're the one that's hostile." Then he called me something I can't repeat here, and left, slamming the bathroom door behind him. I was left there shocked and scared. The only way out of the mall passed through the big Christmas hall, and he would be waiting there. I thought about waiting in the bathroom and hoping he would leave before me, but staying there only made me more vulnerable, as he could come back and attack me. I left the mall as fast as I could. I rushed through the parking lot to get to my car, unlocked it, and then dropped my keys when I saw who was reflecting in the car window. Simon was still there, in his Santa costume, staring at me from the middle of the parking lot. Our eyes locked through the window. Panicking, I thought about what I should do. Should I turn around and try to have another chat with him? No. I decided to pick up my keys and get inside my car and drive home as fast as I could without getting a ticket. I was anxious all night, wondering if he had followed me home. I didn't sleep a wink, but no one came. In the morning, I was too tired and too shaken to go back to work. I only had one more day left as an elf, but I rang up the mall and told the manager about Simon. They immediately fired him and apologized for his behavior. I was glad it was over, but it really affected me. It made me so much more skeptical around men, and more worried about getting jobs like these. I'm still recovering from the horrific events of last winter. I'm a single mom and have a 7-year-old son, James. Last Christmas, he wanted to go to the famous kids concert, which was organized in the local mall's big parking lot. They had been preparing the event for almost a month, and James was super excited, seeing the huge Christmas tree and the fancy decorations around the stage. They did a lot of advertising for the show, too, naming it the Christmas Show of the Decade, and other big words. We lived in a pretty small town, so these things didn't happen that often. I wasn't going to be able to keep my son from attending the event, even though I was sure I was going to get very bored at it. The big night came, and I drove with James to the mall. There were hundreds of children there already, all screaming with excitement as the big screens on stage showed colorful animations which hyped up the show. James was so hyped up himself, he jumped from the car the minute we parked, and for a second, I thought I lost him in the crowd. I yelled his name and he came back to me, and then we made our way together through the crowd, as he wanted to get closer to the stage. The concert started and all the kids started shouting and singing even louder. There were a bunch of people dressed like elves and reindeers on stage, and glitter was flying everywhere. For a moment, I could hear James singing along with the silly tunes, but then I stopped hearing his voice, and when I looked around me, my heart sank. My son was gone. Nothing made sense. He was just there by my side until a second ago. I called his name louder and louder, but of course he couldn't hear. I could hardly hear myself with all the ruckus. I began walking desperately through all the people, who were angry at me for pushing them, but I didn't care. Finding my son was more important than anything else in the whole world. I must have searched through the crowd for 10 or more minutes. I went to my car and back towards the stage, but there was no sign of James. Then I thought of going behind the stage. It's the last place I haven't checked, I thought. So I jogged there and found a much quieter area, with just a bunch of trees and some vans parked at the back, probably belonging to the artists and engineers, I figured. I couldn't see many details as it was dark, and there were no streetlights for a few blocks, but I could hear a strange voice, like an old man laughing or something like that. I followed the noise for a few more steps, and my heart stopped when I saw my son in the arms of someone dressed as Santa Claus. He had just lifted James off the ground and was putting him in the trunk of a white van. "Wait!" I yelled and started running towards him. Santa shoved James in the trunk faster, then hurried to pick up some stuff off the ground. He wasn't fast enough. "No one touches my son," I thought as I plunged into the Santa with my fists. He tried to block me, but I bit his arm as hard as I could, piercing his sleeve and making him scream. I shouted at James to come out of the trunk, grabbed him, and ran as fast as I could straight to the car. I locked all the car doors and waited in the parking lot as I called 911. I told them what I'd seen, not much in terms of appearance, as he was wearing a hat and fake beard. I couldn't even tell his age, just that he had a van and that he deserved to be in jail for a very long time. The police promised to come to the scene and look for him. I waited in the car for a few more minutes, but James was crying and kept saying he wanted to go home. He was very distressed. Remember, he was just 6 at the time. So we went home and tried to watch some cartoons to get our minds off the disturbing event. The next few days were pretty stressful. James didn't want to leave the house, and I felt I was becoming overprotective of him too. 2 or 3 days after the event, I got a call from the police. They had caught the guy, and apparently rescued 2 little boys from his house. A horrible thought, which made me feel sick. What kind of people are out there? I don't even want to know. I was just glad the police rescued those children, and that monster didn't get James too. Wow, that was intense. I hope you liked the stories, and if you did, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to check out 3 horrifying true internet predator stories, all guaranteed to send a shiver down your spine. And if you enjoy Anna Horror Stories, why not subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you're the first one to listen to the fresh, blood-chilling stories. All right, take care of yourselves.